Hello. General Hospital today will reveal, in the ever-evolving landscape of General Hospital, the most seemingly minor plot threads often hide the seeds of something far more explosive. Such is the case with the recent development involving Rocco Falconry, whose quiet decision to fulfill court-mandated community service hours at the hospital may now thrust him into the middle of a web of deceit, manipulation, and power plays that extend far beyond what anyone could have predicted. While audiences may have assumed that Rocco's storyline would unfold in the background, the January 22nd episode planted a very intentional seed when Rocco donned a GH uniform and signed paperwork to begin his hours of labor. The very visibility of this moment suggests that the writers have no intention of regulating his arc to mere filler. Instead, it now appears to be the crucial setup for a storyline that could shake up not just Rocco's life, but also that of Willow and Drew, whose private actions might not be as hidden as they believe. The intriguing twist begins with a classic soap trope, eavesdropping. In a show that thrives on secret conversations and accidental revelations, Rocco may soon find himself overhearing something that he was never meant to know. The buzz surrounding Willow's behavior, particularly in scenes where she is alone with Drew, suggests a stark contrast between her public persona and her private intentions. While Willow has presented herself as emotionally wrecked by Drew's recent health crisis and the grim prognosis handed down by Lucas Jones, cracks in her facade are becoming increasingly evident. To the outside world, Willow appears devastated, going through the emotions of grief and uncertainty with the kind of performative sadness expected someone in her situation. However, in the quiet solitude of Drew's hospital room, where no eyes are supposed to be watching, the truth might be far more unsettling. Whispers within the hospital corridors hint that Willow is not as heartbroken as she pretends. When the door is closed and she believes she is alone, Willow reportedly speaks with a tone of satisfaction, even glee, particularly in conversations with Drew himself. Such behavior not only signals emotional manipulation, but also opens the door to a darker possibility, that Willow may be using Drew's medical condition for personal advantage. Whether to consolidate sympathy, manipulate alliances, or secure her position within the Corinthos and Quartermain spheres of influence, Willow's duplicity, if proven, would represent a staggering betrayal, especially given how deeply Drew has trusted her. This is precisely where Rocco's role becomes pivotal. As a community service worker, he has both access and anonymity, traits that make him the perfect silent observer. No one is likely to suspect that a teenager doing mandated volunteer work would be in a position to overhear confidential exchanges between influential adults. The invisibility becomes his greatest strength. If Rocco stumbles upon a moment where Willow drops her facade, perhaps gloating to Drew about a scheme or carelessly revealing that her grief has been feigned, he could become an unexpected witness to something with massive implications. Furthermore, the psychological impact on Rocco must not be underestimated. He is at a formative age, trying to understand right from wrong, loyalty from justice, and truth from illusion. If he hears something he shouldn't, he would be thrust into an impossible moral quandary. Should he expose Willow and risk the wrath of her supporters, or keep what he knows to himself and let a manipulative narrative continue to harm those around her, possibly even Drew, whose recovery may depend on clarity, honesty, and authentic emotional support? The decision would weigh heavily on someone still grappling with his own role in society, especially given that his service at GH is already part of a larger redemption arc. Additionally, Rocco's connection to Dante and Lulu gives his discovery even more weight. If he shares what he knows with Dante, it could set off a chain reaction through Port Charles's tight-knit community. With Dante's background as a detective and his sense of duty, such a confession wouldn't remain a quiet family matter for long. And if Lulu, even in her current condition, were to be looped into the fallout through her family network, the repercussions would echo far beyond the hospital walls. It could trigger rifts in alliances, reignite long-dormant feuds, or even prompt legal or ethical inquiries into Drew's care or Willow's conduct. The writer's decision to focus on Rocco's work at the hospital at this specific moment in the broader narrative arc feels too intentional to ignore. This isn't just community service. It's a front-row seat to a potential unraveling of deception. It also positions Rocco for his own moment of agency, something that viewers rarely see offered to characters his age. In such a mature and morally complex storyline, and depending on what he hears, his actions could set the tone for the next dramatic shift within the show. Equally compelling is the notion that Drew himself might begin to suspect that something is off about Willow's behavior. Stroke recovery often brings clarity in moments of emotional quiet, and Drew, despite his physical limitations, has always been keenly perceptive. If he senses dissonance in Willow's words or demeanor, or worse, catches her in a moment of celebration or self-interest, the psychological toll could be enormous. As someone who has endured manipulation before, Drew might begin to connect the dots, especially if Rocco provides corroborating information, or if Drew starts to overhear fragments of conversations himself. Ultimately, this storyline has the makings of a perfect storm: a vulnerable patient, a deceptive loved one, and a quiet witness hiding in plain sight. The hospital, with all its sterile surfaces and quiet corners, becomes less a place of healing and more a crucible for truth. And for Rocco, this could be the beginning of his transformation from background character to reluctant hero, one who must choose whether to protect the peace or expose the pain. The stakes are emotional, ethical, and deeply personal. And as General Hospital continues to weave its web of secrets and surprises, all eyes will soon turn to Rocco and the decision he has yet to make. What began as a seemingly minor subplot, a teenager fulfilling court-ordered community service, may now prove to be the linchpin in a much larger drama that threatens to upend relationships and redefine loyalties. If Rocco overhears something damning, if Willow slips even for a moment, and if Drew awakens to find the person at his bedside has been lying all along, then General Hospital may soon deliver one of its most riveting revelations of the year. And it all starts with a pair of ears in the right place at the wrong time. In the twisted corridors of General Hospital, where even the quietest whispers can ignite firestorms of betrayal, it seems Willow's mask may soon begin to crack if it hasn't already. While Willow has long maintained a public image of grace under pressure, especially in the face of Drew's medical emergency, there are subtle, chilling signs that her inner world is anything but pure. Her recent conversation with Nina Reeves was laced with loaded intentions. When she insisted that Drew Kane deserves to receive the treatment he's earned, it sounded less like compassion and more like a veiled condemnation. And it's becoming increasingly evident that Willow's presence at Drew's bedside might not stem from concern or loyalty, but from a sinister need to control the narrative and to ensure that her version of events remains unquestioned, even if it requires manipulation, threats, or calculated cruelty. What if behind that veil of grief, Willow is seething with resentment? Perhaps her heartbreak is less about Drew's suffering and more about the deep bitterness she harbors from the damage she believes he inflicted on her life. She might still blame him for derailing everything she envisioned for herself, for shaking her sense of stability, or for tarnishing the facade she's worked so hard to preserve. In that case, her interactions with him, particularly when she believes no one is watching, could be far more vindictive than the public halies. Willow may soon find herself unable to resist lashing out at the very man lying paralyzed before her, using his helpless state as an opportunity to express rage cloaked in triumph. We can imagine a scenario where she leans in close to Drew's unconscious body, whispering not words of comfort, but cruel satisfaction. She might even taunt him with the memory of the gunshots, 2 bullets that should have ended his story, and laugh at the commie irony of how easily she walked away unpunished. Willow, who has carefully crafted an image of victimhood and nobility, could reveal the monster behind the mask. She may boast that the world sees her as a grieving partner, yet she was the one who brought Drew to the brink of death, and she did it with ruthless precision. Her manipulation didn't end with the shooting. Now she's taken it further by staging the stroke and making sure no one suspects her. She may even boast about how she disposed of the incriminating syringe, careful to erase every trace of her latest assault. And all the while she believes the room is empty. But what if it isn't Rocco Falconeri, whose presence at GH has been framed as little more than a plot device for community service? Might be exactly where he needs to be, not by coincidence but by design. Whether he was assigned to clean Drew's room, retrieve supplies, or simply open the door at the wrong moment, he may end up in the right place to witness a shocking confession. Unseen by Willow, Rocco could be standing in the shadows, listening as she unloads her twisted version of justice onto an unconscious man who cannot defend himself. Or perhaps the door is ajar, the hallway silent, and Rocco pauses outside just long enough to catch every venomous word. For Willow, this could be the fatal mistake, the assumption that her privacy is absolute. In her arrogance, she may forget that hospitals are never truly private. Doors open. Carts roll past. Volunteers like Rocco wander in and out, often ignored as background noise. But Rocco isn't just any volunteer. He's the son of a detective raised in a household that values integrity and truth. If he hears something unsettling, something criminal, he won't be able to ignore it. He might not even fully understand the gravity of what he's heard at first, but the seed of suspicion will be planted. And it will grow with each recollection, with each interaction that confirms that Willow is not who she pretends to be. This then reframes the entire reason for Rocco's placement at GH. His community service isn't filler, it's fate. The writers have chosen to embed him in the very environment where secrets threaten to surface, where his innocence could be shattered by truths far darker than he expected to encounter. And while Rocco may initially struggle with what to do, torn between fear, loyalty, and justice, his role as a silent witness could soon become a catalyst for a massive upheaval in Port Charles. Should he confide in someone like Dante, the consequences would be immediate. Drew's medical records might be re-examined, security footage pulled, and questions raised about Willow's behavior before, during, and after the stroke. If a syringe truly disappeared, and if there's evidence of tampering or inconsistency in Drew's treatment timeline, it could lead to a criminal investigation. But even if Rocco doesn't speak up right away, his demeanor could shift. He may begin to observe Willow differently, question her presence, her words, and her sudden involvement in Drew's care. And once he sees her with open eyes, there's no telling what else he might uncover. Meanwhile, Willow's descent into villainy may continue unchecked, at least in her own mind. Feeling emboldened by the false sense of security that comes from seeing Drew incapacitated and the syringe destroyed, she could become more reckless. Perhaps she returns to his room again and again, using it as a confessional for her bitterness, never realizing that the walls have ears. Each visit becomes more dangerous, each word she speaks another nail in her carefully constructed persona. And Rocco, gathering these fragments, may be the only one who can piece together the full picture. The implications for Drew are just as harrowing. If and when he regains full consciousness, and if Rocco has shared what he's heard, he will be forced to reconcile not only with the fact that Willow betrayed him, but that she actively sought to destroy him while pretending to love him. The psychological impact of that revelation could be even more devastating than the stroke itself. And for Willow, any hope of redemption would vanish. Her crimes would be exposed not just legally, but emotionally. She would no longer be seen as a grieving figure, but as a calculated predator who used a man's vulnerability to punish him for past sins. In the end, this storyline holds all the elements of classic General Hospital drama: betrayal, secrecy, psychological warfare, and the unexpected rise of a young character caught in the crossfire. Rocco's journey from silent observer to truth-bearer could redefine his place in the show, elevating him from the periphery to the forefront. And Willow, once beloved and misunderstood, may finally reveal the darkness she's kept hidden for too long. It only takes one moment, one overheard confession, to unravel everything. And if Rocco hears what he's not meant to, the unraveling has already begun. As the web of secrets tightens, Willow's false sense of control begins to erode in the very environment she believes she's mastered. The sterile white walls of General Hospital, which once shielded her from scrutiny, may now close in with quiet menace. Her growing boldness marked by whispered confessions to an unconscious Drew and a careless disregard for who might be nearby reflects not confidence but a subtle unraveling of her psychological restraint. The moment Willow allowed herself to speak her truth aloud, she invited danger. She gave power to words that could destroy her if heard by the wrong ears. And in Port Charles, secrets never stay buried for long. For Rocco, the burden of knowledge becomes heavier with each passing hour. The initial shock of hearing Willow's gloating may give way to deeper questions about morality, about justice, and about his own role in a town where right and wrong often blur. As the son of Dante Falconeri, Rocco has grown up in the shadow of law enforcement and integrity. But unlike his father, Rocco lacks the training and emotional armor to process the weight of criminal secrets. He is still a young man caught between duty and dread, conscience and confusion. What he witnessed or overheard wasn't just gossip or betrayal. It was a confession of violence spoken with a calm so chilling it could haunt him long after he leaves the hospital. He may try to convince himself he misunderstood. Perhaps Willow didn't mean what she said. Maybe it was grief talking. Maybe she's just tired. But no amount of rationalization can silence the echo of her words, especially if they carry cruel clarity and intent. And as Willow continues her visits, oblivious to the fracture she's caused in someone else's innocence, Rocco becomes the keeper of a dangerous truth. The longer he holds onto it, the more isolated he will feel. Every interaction will be laced with unease, especially if Willow begins to sense that something is off. The irony, of course, is that Willow's greatest threat doesn't come from a police detective or a rival nurse. It comes from a teenager in scrubs quietly sweeping the floor. Her arrogance has blinded her to the reality that no place is ever truly private in General Hospital. And the more she returns to Drew's bedside, the more opportunities she gives Rocco to hear more damning details, more venomous tirades, more slips of the tongue that reveal her complicity not just in Drew's suffering, but in the manipulation of everyone around her. Back in Drew's room, there may come a moment where his condition begins to improve, just enough for his senses to return, even if speech eludes him. A flicker of awareness, a glance, a tear, something subtle that Willow misses but Rocco doesn't. That change could galvanize Rocco to act, to confide in someone he trusts, or at the very least, to begin documenting what he hears and sees. And if Drew eventually awakens fully, Rocco may be the only person able to validate the creeping suspicion that the person caring for him is in fact his greatest enemy. Beyond the hospital, the consequences of Rocco's potential testimony loom large. If he tells Dante, the case could escalate into a full-blown criminal investigation. If he confides in someone closer to Willow like Michael or Carly, it could fracture long-standing alliances. Willow has embedded herself deep within the core families of Port Charles, and her fall would send shockwaves through the Corinthos, Quartermain, and Kane circles alike. Her exposure would force everyone to reevaluate their loyalty, their memories, and their blind spots. How many signs did they miss? How many red flags did they ignore? And then there's Nina, who may find herself drawn into the story in unexpected ways, having once been portrayed as the unfit mother, the obsessive manipulator, and the outsider. Nina might now watch as Willow, the very woman who condemned her, reveals her own capacity for cruelty and deceit. If Nina learns that Willow confessed to her one thing but did the opposite behind closed doors, the emotional stakes would deepen. Nina's guilt, rage, or even desire for revenge could reignite, this time justified by truth rather than paranoia.